Hello, everyone. Welcome. It is Thursday, and I'm just waiting for my guest today to jump on. And here she is. So let me invite you to join us, Joanna. And she's coming right up. Hi.
Hello. It is
Hel-
lovely to see you this
It's
morning.
great to see you also. I kind of wore some sparkle. It made me
Oh,
think of
yay.
you. So hello,
A
everyone.
semi-cute is
And
on.
what? Yeah,
I said a little
welcome.
bit of sparkle on.
There you go. You always are sparkling. So, welcome to Taking the Leap. And I'm Karen Sates. I'm your host. I'm also CEO of Mastermind X and founder. And I'm super excited to have with me today, yay, Joanna Bloor. And welcome, Joanna. It's so
Thank you.
great to see you. So, I
I
always start off by saying how we met. And I actually met Joanna at a conference that I was producing. It's called Gathering of the Titans. And believe it or not, we're having it in less than 2 weeks again in Boston at MIT. And it's been a couple of years due to COVID. So it's really exciting, to see everyone. And I met Joanna the first night. I sat next to her during dinner. And I remember having this conversation that just blew my mind. I was just like, oh my God. And so, and I've known her for now, I guess that's about 4 or 5 years ago.
It's been a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that was an amazing event. I had a good time getting to meet everybody there and talking to everybody because wow, what a group of people. They were all inspiring, right?
Yeah, I mean, they are all inspiring. They're all CEOs and they've all done amazing things. And so each year is different and a surprise. And I'm super excited to have it in person again and really see everyone. So it's going to be great. So tell me, oh my God, I haven't seen you in so long. First of all, no one really knows you. So I'm hoping you can tell us a little bit about why you blew my mind because you're so amazing. So
Thank
just
you.
so meet everyone and tell us a little bit about who are you? Where are you from? What
Sure.
have you done with your life? And kind of
And
where you
all the
are
good
today.
things. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole
So
thing.
I was thinking about, because I know you gave me that question as kind of a teaser of what to start with this morning. And the where I've come from and where I'm going is such a crazy story because if I sit here and go, like, what is the narrative of my entire life? It's always been of somebody who has always been super comfortable hanging out on the skinny branches of life, the tree of life. When I was about 15, my family moved me from southern England
Mm-hmm.
to central Texas.
Oh,
And
wow.
just to kind of give you a visual on the shift in lifestyle, I went to school in England at a school that could only be described as like Hogwarts without boys or magic, to a school that was which was literally, I think, less than 30 miles from where they filmed Friday Night Lights.
Oh, wow.
Um, and there were two really big lessons that as a teenager were really surprising and also transforming for me. One was that relationships are everything. Um, I have a completely unshakable belief that we choose each other. And if you choose to be friends with somebody, it's your job to make the choice. Like it's your choice. Like you put in the effort. And um, it was a bit of a painful lesson at 15, but it was a really great lesson and set me in really good stead for the rest of my life. That and then the other one, which really is what brings me here today and where I talk about living life on the skinny branches, is, I'd been brought up in this kind of Victorian, rules-based culture. Um, and I came to Texas and there was a whole different set of rules. And a whole different set of rules that I had to learn and had to figure out, like from everything from dating to like how the education system worked to how society navigated.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that other than the don't be a jerk and don't injure and or hurt yourself or somebody else, kind of the illegal stuff,
Uh-huh.
like really all of the rules were nonsense. And you know,
You
it was
had
this huge,
transitions really early
I
on.
had
I mean,
super
this
early
is
transition.
like, wow,
I know. So
transformative at, in high school. That's
yeah. Well, I
huge.
say this because, I know when you reached out to say, hey, Joanna, will you come? Is because you're talking to people who are all like either considering making big leaps in their life or are making big leaps in their life. And I know part of why we're talking is, gosh, it's now 6 years ago, I made a professional massive leap.
Hmm.
Um, I was, and this brings you, there's been multiple versions of this, and I say that because I've been making leaps so many times in my life that I feel like my muscles are really strong at that. And so I sit here and I go, when you haven't done it much, you have to practice.
Right.
But, about 6 years ago, I was running, uh, well, I was an executive at Pandora, the music company. I had just helped the company get from about 100 million in revenue a year to about 1 billion in revenue a year.
That was a big leap.
My team there had gone from 30 people to 400.
Hmm.
Um, we had ticked every single performance box that could be ticked. Like the
Hmm.
team had crushed it. I was absolutely killing it. Like all of the things were there. And then
Did you start with them when they first started, or like were
no,
you
no,
on the
no.
original
They
team?
had
Or
brought me, yeah, they had brought me in. I had spent the 25 years prior being really a startup junkie. I'm so lucky, like, because I was a bit of a leaper. My first,
hmm
oh, there were leaps before that, but my first big professional leap was when I was about 25. And I went to go work for this, at the time, little company called CitySearch, which, if anybody remembers who they were, was one of the very first .com companies.
hmm
Um, they then loaned me out to companies like Cars.com. I then helped build companies like Pandora, OpenTable, CNET. Was part of the
But always a
whole,
job, always in a role.
always working for somebody else. And when I was at Pandora, and I'll never forget the day, there had been a bit of a regime change at the top. But I was pretty confident because we had done a spectacular
Yeah.
job. And my boss came into me and oh, it's been 6 years and it still kind of
You
gets me. And
remember
he
that
said,
moment,
oh
right?
no, I totally remember the moment. I could tell you where I was standing, the whole thing.
Mm.
And he said to me, we think that you're not the person to lead this team forward in the future. And I was heartbroken and weirdly also not surprised. Um, and it was at that moment I realized that this was not about was I qualified. This was not about my results.
Hmm.
What I realized in that moment is that I had forgotten the key rule, the one that I had made up for myself when I was 15. I'd broken my own rule. And it's that in every relationship, personal, professional,
Hmm.
relationships, we opt in to the future of each other. We don't actually opt into our past. We opt into our vision of the future.
Hmm.
And while I had absolutely, when I went to go work at Pandora, um, when I met with the CEO to interview for the job, I will also never forget, like his first question to me, and I'm gonna ask a weird question, and if you're in the ad tech world, you'll know what it means, but it doesn't really. He basically said to me, his first question to me was, Joanna, do you think we should replace DoubleClick as the ad serving system? Which somebody who was interviewing for that job at the time was a very rational question. And I turned to him
Hmm.
and I said, I'm really sorry, Mr. Kennedy, but I think you're asking the wrong question. To which he was like, excuse me?
Right.
And I said, do you want me to tell you what the right question is and why? And he was like, absolutely. And the conversation thereafter is frankly why I think I got the job. Because I painted a vision for the future, because I understood where Pandora was in their development, where it was they needed to go, and had not only the experience, but the vision
But
of
you also
how
did
to.
your homework. I
I
mean,
did,
you
like, I knew what
clearly,
I needed to
right.
come in and I was like, this is actually the future you want from me. And he was like, totally want that. While I had that at the beginning of my career, by the time, it was 4 years in, I didn't have a vision for the future. And I sat down and I was like, hang on a second. Because I will admit, I was kind of mad at the beginning because I was like, are you kidding me? Like, look at all of the stuff I've done. What I realized was that not only did they not opt into my future, but I hadn't given them anything to opt into.
Interesting.
I had not given them a path into the future. And this is why, and I know when we first met, you heard me say this, when I go out and I speak with teams and individuals and companies, I say to them, look, every decision made about you and your opportunities is made in a room that you are not in, is one of the first things I teach people, because I say, look, they are not choosing your title, your qualifications, your results. They are choosing their belief in the future you, and they are opting into that. And if you as an individual, whether you are an employee in a team, a leader, a CEO, or just somebody wanting to make a friend, are not making it easy to opt into who you are going to be for somebody in the future, well, then you have got nobody to blame but yourself.
So you have to do the work. I mean,
Yeah,
you have to put in the work in order for them to understand that you see that future, you know, before you can paint that for them, you have to be able to see it.
And that's where I come back, and that was the aha moment for me. And
I don't think most people go into it thinking that way, Joanna.
No,
I mean, I know that when you said that in that moment, I was like, huh? What? You know, I was like, oh, really? Okay.
I know. Well, but this comes back to, and this is why I say I've been learning this lesson since I was a teenager. Because I was almost, and I say this to people, like in the world, regardless of what the engagement is, you are renting a subscription to your future time to people. Like, that's the product as human beings that we offer to each other. Like, everybody who's listening right now and who's stayed on is all like, I'm totally buying that, because they're like, hang on a second, what is this crazy lady going to say next? I am curious to find out, you know, what questions is Karen going to ask? And we have all been taught to talk about our past. We've all been taught like it's your personal brand, or
well, it feels tangible. It feels, I mean, you experienced it, so you kind of know it, right? But to think about your future, but to think of your future, you're like, well, I don't know it, right?
Right. But the other piece of this, and I'm going to use you and I as an example. Perfect. Like, you know, we were reconnected because you and I haven't spoken in, I think, a couple of years. I saw you in Boston when I was going through pre-COVID.
We had lunch. It was great.
Right, it was awesome. But we have a mutual friend, Lori Bond, who is amazing. And by the way, folks, if you're not following her, you should totally follow her too, because she's basically, we are like the yin and yang of personalities. She's amazing. And she was the one who nudged you and nudged me and said, hey, Karen, you and Joanna should talk to each other. And while you and I didn't have any conversation, you made a decision about this event based on the story you were telling in your head about what this could be like, based on what I had taught you about how I think, how I was going to show up. The fact that you showed up in sparkles is a complete testament to the whole thing. I'm known for doing the sequins.
Well, I was thinking about, okay, who are you, you know? Not just about me, but who are you, and what do I know about you, and what do I appreciate about you? And the sparkles go beyond the clothes, right? I mean, the sparkles are just the outside.
This was the big transformation, because I sit here and I say, I'm going to go back to that moment of Pandora where they were like, basically, I mean, they were actually very sweet about it, because they were like, we want you to have a role in the company. We're just going to find you a new boss. And I was all like, I don't think so. I actually opted out of, I was like, not only do I not see a future for myself, but I don't want to opt into it. I don't want to offer anything. And I actually opted out. And I say that because, like, everybody is talking about the great resignation right now, or the great reassess, whatever you call it. And I'm like, it's actually very simple. If people aren't opting in, they're opting out. And in this working world we have today, which especially for people who want to be an entrepreneur, it's amazing. There are so many more options that I'm like, this is not going to be a blip. This is the standing state of how
this is the future.
This is the way it is. And so if you are leading a team, or if you are building a team, you better be intentional about what each individual on your team is opting into. And it is not about a job description, and it is not about your company's mission, vision, and values, because ambition is unique to the individual, and why they are opting in is unique to them. Now, similar to the way your resume and all your past stuff matters, the same way job descriptions in the company, like the job description and mission, vision, value matter, but it's about what future are they opting into, and are you building a leadership practice and a culture so that not only can they opt into you as a leader, but they can opt into the future they want, and more importantly, they can opt in to each other. Like I come back to like what was, like you had a room full of gargantuan personalities at that GOT event, like gargantuan personalities. And I've heard the story about how they all came together. Like they were only ever supposed to come together once, and they have been coming together every year
20
since
years.
then,
Exactly.
which is unbelievable. Like everybody once talks about, oh, you should build a community. Like these people have done it automatically, but they all opt into each other. And when people opt into each other, that's when the magic can happen. And we've all been on the team where we've had people where are like, I want you, you want me, it's all good. We've made magic things happen. It's when that is off that things start getting a little cranky. But so I digress, and I come back to, so I had decided that future with Pandora was not what I wanted anymore.
In your cards.
No. And so I sat there and I was like, well, what do I want to do now? And fortunately, I had been given the gift of time through various different scenarios. And so I went on a bit of an odyssey of being really open and curious about what was interesting to me. But this narrative of I hadn't created something that I was excited to choose, that I was excited to opt into, that I was excited to offer to other people, was kind of a quiet roar in my ear at the time.
Had you thought about going on your own? Had you thought about?
Oh, I'd always, yeah, no, I think I'd always wanted to be an entrepreneur since I was like, I mean, I was that kid in school that had like side hustle things. Like my mother jokes, which in England was highly inappropriate, and I got into an awful lot of trouble. But when I was like 6, you know, when you're like 6, 7, 8, you have all sorts of like fads and games and stuff like that. And I do also understand I went to a very, it was an awesome all girls school, but we were kind of kooky in a whole separate way. And I say that because one of the fads that happened, and I think I probably can't be more than like 7 or 8, was snail racing. It's a thing. And I realized that because we had this awesome cellar at the house I lived in, because if you live in England, nothing is less than like a bazillion years old. And so there's a lot of old, dark, dank places where snails and slugs are rampant. I realized I had a pretty good snail population in my backyard. And so I would barter snails during the snail racing fad for colored pencils when I was like 8. So like the joke in my family is that I always was an entrepreneur. And that, you know,
you learned how to negotiate really early on.
Yeah. And I also sit here and say, like the lessons I learned, because I was in the startup and digital media space for 25 years. I got very comfortable learning how to explain products that people didn't understand. Like I go back to, what was it, 1995 when I was at CitySearch. I was in Austin, Texas. The internet speed was like 14.4. For those of you that don't know, that is
slow.
Like it's like we were on telephones and stuff.
Slow.
Like, terribly. It was super slow. 30% of the Austin population had internet access alone, and Austin at the time had the highest internet penetration in the country. And I was going around explaining to companies that they needed to build websites for their company, and people were like, "I don't even know what you're talking about." Like we were competing against the Yellow Pages. And I did that over and over and over again. And I come back to what happened after I left Pandora, which changed my life, because through putting my hand up and experimenting and all sorts of other craziness, I got invited to speak at TED about a project I was doing. It was an intersection of 3D printing and weight loss. If you go onto YouTube, you can see the video. I was a comedic speaker at the big TED conference.
It's a big deal. I mean,
it was
that's
a big
deal.
It was, and I actually leave on Sunday to go back to TED this week, which I'm super excited about.
Wow.
It was, I mean, I will say to everybody, getting curated and coached by the TED organization, even for, and I think it's like a 4, maybe 7-minute presentation, was such an education. It was so good. But I got invited to go to TED, and you go to TED, it's only 2,000 people. It was impossibly hard to get in, all of this sort of stuff.
Right.
And you're walking around and you're like, oh my God, that's Shonda Rhimes in the bookstore, or oh my God, I'm having tea like 20 feet from Al Gore.
It's pretty awesome.
Like your head just kind of goes, because you're like,
right.
What have I done? And then you have all these speakers and you're like, what have I done with my life? And there's weirdly a lot of standing in line that happens at TED to get into the theater, to get into events, but it's actually curated standing in line because that's when you meet people.
Right.
And I was talking with a Microsoft executive who was no slouch herself. She was there to help introduce the HoloLens product to the TED audience. It was their major launch. It was a huge deal. And I was chit-chatting with her about this idea of how do you answer the question, what do you do? Which is the first time people get an idea of who you are and what it is you have to offer. And we were talking about this, and I was truly curious. And I said to her kind of flippantly, I said, well, if I was going to go ask somebody in your network, like, what are you known for? What would they say? And she said, well, I guess they would call me Microsoft girl. And I said, and I'm about to swear a tiny bit, because I said, I think that's super fucking boring and you should do something about that. and then I was like, oh my God, did I just say that out loud to this really fancy Microsoft exec? And fortunately, she laughed. We're still friends today. Fortunately, she laughed and she was like, you know what, you're absolutely right.
You didn't think to hold back, huh?
No.
It just sort of just came out.
I don't generally hold back, and that's maybe it's a strength and a weakness at the same time. But she called me about 6 weeks later and said, Joanna, part of going to TED is getting your mind blown. But the conversation I had with you was the one that stuck. Would you come up to Redmond and talk to my team about this idea of how do you answer the question, what do you do? And I thought, awesome new friend, totally asking a favor. And I thought, sure. I was like, absolutely, of course I'll do that. And she goes, great. Can you send me a proposal? And I was like, oh, wait a second. She's going to pay me for this.
Right.
And I was like, I was sitting there and I was like, make a proposal. And I said, yes, of course. And then she said, because you have a program, right? And I was like, yes, absolutely. I had nothing.
That's the true entrepreneur that always says yes and
nothing.
Figures it out later. Right.
Nothing. And so I was all like, well, hang on a second. I need to, like, this could be fun and I need to be able to pay my taxes. And so maybe there's some paper, like I did all the things.
Right.
And I think I used like Google Docs and I was like, what would a contract look like? And went through all the things with like, Microsoft is your first client? Really? And I went up to Redmond and was doing a one-day, actually it was like a half-day workshop with them around this idea of talking about the future you. And I will...
Did you test it out with friends before you did it?
No. I was fairly confident because I had been performing and speaking at events and engagements for most of my career because I was somebody who talked about the future of technology all the time. Like I was known for doing things on stage. So performing in front of an audience I was like, I know how to do that. And then I also just gotten coaching from TED. I'm also I'm a horrifyingly experimental entrepreneur. My poor team is all like, Joanna, oh my God, you have like 12 ideas a day. Mm-hmm. And I actually think the best customer relationships are when you co-create, especially when you're in the world of delivering ideas. You really have to co-create because you might have all of the genius ideas on the planet, but if it doesn't land with people, it doesn't matter. And I had been pretty upfront. Like after she said, do you have a proposal and do you have a program? I called her up and I confessed. And I was like, you realize when you asked me that I had nothing. I said, but I'm going to come in and do stuff. And she goes, oh, no. Again, she was she had opted in to who she thought I was going to be, and she was really comfortable with making that bet with me. But I came in and there was probably, what, 30 people in the room going through this, and I had asked the question of the room to take a moment and think about what is it they wanted to be wanted for,
Mm-hmm.
which is a nuanced question than what is it you want to be known for, because it's very past focused. And when you say what do you want to be wanted for, you're actually talking about what is it you want to offer people to choose, which, while it's all about you, it's actually not
Mm-hmm.
about you at all. It's about what does somebody else want from you. And I'll never forget, it was actually this woman, Karen, as well, who was
Mm-hmm.
sitting in the front row, who physically looked stressed out, physically looked like she was having an uncomfortable time. I've subsequently learned that everybody kind of freaks out when I start to ask that question. But I came up to her and I said, like, clearly this is not an awesome question for you. Can you, like, talk to me for a second? Like, what's going on here? And she goes, I don't even know where to start. Like, I don't know why people need me or want me, which broke my heart.
Right.
And I was like, well, just talk to me for a second about who you are and what you're all about, and like what's your job? And I just started asking her questions. And I'll tell you, Karen, I couldn't help myself because I could hear why the future Karen was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Literally could hear it, like the bubble was over her
But she
head, and
didn't realize it.
no, she didn't know any of it. And I looked at her and I was like, oh my God, I know why you're awesome and how to tell people. And she goes,
Mm-hmm.
what do you mean? And I said, well, this is how I would answer the question, what I do if I was you? And I said it out loud. And she promptly burst into tears. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And she was like, no, no. Literally no one has ever articulated why I matter in the working world before, and you did it so beautifully, and I'm a bit
And
overwhelmed.
quickly, you
Yeah.
did it in seconds. I mean,
And it was very fast.
and
And
it's something that you did at this conference also. You
yeah.
pulled people up on stage. So clearly it's part of now
Yeah,
what you
well,
do.
that was the moment, because the room was by this point pin drop quiet, and somebody in the back said, "Oh my God, that was amazing. Can you do it again?" And I
Right.
was like, "I don't know. Let's give it a go." And I
Right.
ended up doing 20 transformations in that room that day. Every single one was different. Single one, every single person was like, "Oh, I'm amazing. I'm amazing. I'm amazing." It was kind of great. And I realized that not only did I have this point of view that was not what everybody else was talking about around this idea of opting into the future you,
Mm-hmm.
that was a really different way of thinking about, like, how to make a future for yourself that really anchors on who you are and what makes you uniquely awesome, but also is fantastically generous. It's like you could take ambition and generosity
Mm-hmm.
and make them the right thing. And like, I think about entrepreneurs, there's a mountain of ambition, and actually the best entrepreneurs are the ones who not are generous in that they give it all away, but they're generous in their desire to serve their audience. And that's what I got known for, and it's why I got invited to GOT. And I remember, I remember
I
the room there
remember
too.
I
I always
remember you
remember.
doing it on stage. I
Well,
know who you did it
yeah,
with.
well, so I remember initially, because I always pull people out of the
Mm-hmm.
audience and do a demo, and
Exactly.
I asked for a volunteer, and Randy Cohen put his hand up, and I told him to put his hand back down because clearly he was far too confident for this sort of exercise. He now and
But it was
I are
Peter
now
that you did it. I remember you did it with Peter on
I did
stage.
it with Peter Laughter, and I'm still friends with both Randy and Peter. Peter and I have actually collaborated in a couple of different ways because
Mm-hmm.
we had I had an amazing conversation with Peter. I've had subsequent amazing conversations with Randy as well. Um, and it was in that moment at Microsoft that I realized that not only, like, everybody talks about that intersection of, like, what are you good at, what are you passionate about, and where you can make some money on the side. I was
Right.
like, hang on a second, this is a really um, unique skill and a unique point of view. And
100%.
yeah, and in a big way, while I certainly work with a lot of CEOs and entrepreneurs and all of that sort of stuff, like, I am as much here for the team, because when I think about what an entrepreneur, like, when you're an entrepreneur, and I now feel this more than ever, what's really hard is no one is as focused and as dedicated and as curious and all of the things as you are about your thing.
Mm-hmm.
No one's ever going to be. There's a level of inner desire that kind of has to be there for yourself. And when you have a team of people, helping them figure out what is their version of that in conjunction with how do they follow you, is actually really hard. And so while as I said, I certainly work with CEOs around how do you teach people
So
about
you work
Future
with
You?
individuals, but you also
Yeah,
work with a
but I
team.
come in with teams and I
Right.
say, like, they
Right.
all need it too. And especially when you start dealing with bigger companies, because I do work with companies like I've worked with the Air Force and with Salesforce and with
Right.
Microsoft, and or it's like work with some really big companies, and then some. I just worked with a VTOL company, which is vertical takeoff airplanes. It was only 25
Wow.
people. At the end of the day, absolutely everything that you need to build needs more than one person to come together to collaborate. And
Right.
when they understand who the other people on the team are going to be in the future, they don't worry about title. They don't worry about credit. They don't like that.
But they
Everybody
understand
knows
what each can contribute and
yeah,
what
they
their
understand, and then
skills
what,
are.
yeah, and their ambitions for the future, and
Right.
it makes collaboration and creativity, and probably most importantly, confidence go up.
And
And
trust.
yeah, it's all of those things. And if collaboration and community and confidence are up in a team, you can figure out how to create a path forward. And
Anything's right.
for any company, um, like similar to moving from England to Texas at 15, you know, the rule book has been thrown out of the window. I mean, not only it's been set fire, stomped on, thrown out the window, and then somebody's chucked a bucket of water on it. And so, the challenge for any leader today is to figure out like what is your new rule book? And for
If
those
you're a
people,
good leader, if you're a good leader, you are truly going to ask that question, right?
yeah,
Because there
well,
aren't, everyone's not such a great leader. And they're sort of, they kind of make this decision on their own. They don't
mm,
really look and,
so I'm gonna push back on that. I think
yeah,
everybody has the potential to be a good leader
I agree with
because
that.
leadership is not actually about um, do you have the title or um, do you know the way. Leadership for me are the people who are collaborating with you, whether they report into you or not,
Mm-hmm.
opting into the adventure that you are offering them.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are doing that, then you're actually asking you as the leader are opting into what it is they're going to contribute to that adventure, and it is an adventure, and it allows every person within that to. And now I get into the whole to be their
But you
authentic
have
self
to
and
be
all of
able to
that. But
articulate that. I mean, you have
yeah,
to understand it.
well, which is why I come back. Like this is
Right.
ultimately what I
It comes
teach
back to
people.
your initial,
Right.
concept here.
Right. So yeah, this is why like when I say every decision made about you and your opportunities is made in a room that you're not in, I go 3 very simple questions. 1,
Mm-hmm.
what do you want to offer? 2, who do you want to offer it to? And 3, why do they care? Which I'll come back to anybody who is offering a product in the world. Like if you are an entrepreneur, you understand that in your customer journey, like even if I was selling this pen, I'd be like, what is it I want to offer this pen? Who do I want to offer to? Who is your customer market? And why would they care? What is the value proposition of this pen?
Mm-hmm.
Our future time is that same product concept. And so, yeah, I now teach people how to offer their future time to people and then hopefully get paid for it at the end of the day.
And
Doesn't
and
matter what
one
it is.
and there's really no way to bucket that. That is like a completely
No.
unique. I mean, I think what you do is so unique, and it does flip the way people start to think about who they are, what they do, what they offer. I remember you stopped me about, I don't know, 30 seconds into myself
I'm all
describing,
like,
well, I'm a this, I'm a that. You're like, nah, that's not who you are. That is not, that is not who you are. And you stop me, and I'm like, wait a minute, but it is, until you start to like step back, and it is like an onion, and you are peeling those layers, and you are, really starting to look at yourself differently through your questions and through your ability to see who that person is at their core, and where are they going,
We're going to have to
and
do
what
this
do they
interview every
want.
morning because you're just giving me a little pep talk on all of things. Well, and to kind of up level the conversation a bit, like I sit here and I say, like I also believe that we all have a bit of ambiguity exhaustion right now. Like the last couple of years have been particularly horrifying
Right.
for everybody in some way, shape, or form. Like we all have bruises. And um, and I sit here and I say, like, what does the future hold for all of us? And I don't know about you, but the current narrative around work and all of the things seems almost kind of Mad Maxian in it. Like I sit here and I go, is it going to head us into the future that where there's scarcity and people are competing and there's a winner take all sort of mentality, and it's not very generous. And it, like, I'm not sure I'd want to live in the Mad Max world. It's a bit competitive. And I do look to the movies and stories for inspiration, and I was looking at Star Trek as a model because I'm looking here, I look at that and I go, wow, even 1960s Star Trek, where you still had, and no ding on the guys, but you still had the alpha male who was a bit like, I am awesome, watch me be
Right.
fabulous.
Right.
Gotta love James T. Kirk. But you look about the structure of the world of work within the lens of Gene Roddenberry and the Star Trek model, where there was no money. You really, like, who knew if they had assets, right? Because they were all out in space for everybody.
Right.
But you sit here and say, like, what was amazing in any version of the Star Trek world is everybody was opting into each other. And if you actually looked at the prime directive of Star Trek, sorry, I'm totally nerding out here.
That's okay.
Is
Going.
I mean, other than the people who were trying to kill them, which was, like the Vulcan, not the Vulcans,
You
the
always had to
Klingons,
have
and
that.
I know I'm a bit of a nerd. I'm like, somebody said I was like Bette Midler meets Tony Robbins with a side of Gene Roddenberry, and I was like, actually, it was Lori who told me that. I was like, I would totally take that.
Uh-huh.
But
Well,
I
they're
sit
all
here and I
genius
say,
in their own right. So.
right, but you sit here and say, like, the work model of Star Trek is actually one that's really quite amazing because, like, let's just take 1960s Star Trek. So Star Trek in the 1960s was during the Cold War, was during race riots. Some of this sound familiar? It was a really tumultuous
Right.
time, and yet in Star Trek, the pilot was a Russian, for goodness sake. And you had Lieutenant Uhura, who was the translator, who was an African American woman. And there was no conversation about, are you part of my club and do you look like me and sound like me? And it was all, I'm actually opting into you for your unique contribution to this adventure we're taking together. Right. And they clearly chose each other for that reason. And moreover respected each other. And unless you were the poor guy wearing the red shirt going to the planet and would die in an episode, it's a bit sad.
You were going to survive, and you were going to survive together as a group.
And they were taking, like, you sit here and say, entrepreneurship is about navigating risk because you are making a bet on the future. And really, the entire Star Trek series was curiosity around the future and how do you think about new societies and new communities and what can you learn from them. And, like, I'm a big Star Trek fan.
Right,
I also love Star Wars. I don't judge, although they were a bit too combative. But I sit here and I go, like, when I come in and say, like, what is we all as human beings actually have more power than we think in actually narrating what the future could be. And so I challenge all leaders out there that there's a model that already exists that we can support, which, yes, is really unknown, and yes, is going to require some really strategic thinking. And yes, is going to require creativity. And yes, at times could be super freaking scary.
Right.
And it's all there in the stories of Star Trek, but it starts with answering the what is it as an individual on the team you want to offer people, making it easy for them to recognize that, like Star Trek made it really easy because they had the
Right.
colored uniforms, right?
Exactly.
And then remembering, like anything that we buy, that it's actually about somebody else's perception that matters. And so being generous with what it is you have to offer makes people go, totally want that or not, which is also
Right.
totally fine too. And so, yeah, so, I get to be a fairy godmother on the side doing my transformations, but ultimately I sit here and go, uh, we are all more confident and more excited by work when we know what it is we're opting into. And if we don't, like,
Mm-hmm.
we are the news coming up is we're going to be launching a book soon called Bored, Stuck, and Scared, which are the
Oh, wow.
like you are either bored, stuck, scared, or awesome if you are part of a team. And the goal is to be in the awesome step space, but lots of people are bored, stuck, and scared. And like, how do you move out of that into that awesome space? Because when you're like, I got this, again, the magic can happen. And we are all going to need people to make their own magic in this new
In
world
this
that's emerging.
in this hard environment. Exactly. Do
Yeah.
you think so? I know you work with both men and women, and
Yeah.
you know, do you see a difference in terms of how women internalize or externalize, all of this? I mean, do they react differently? Do they come at it, with a different point of view at that sea level, or do they
Yeah.
all kind of,
Yeah.
or
Yes,
do you find it the
and
same?
yeah, no, yes, and um, here's the truth. And I said this earlier. Every single, and this is why I don't, well, we certainly do group activities. The actual transformation work is individual because every single person's past, present, and future is unique to them.
Right.
Um, and so there's that. Are there some patterns that that I
Mm-hmm.
recognize? Yes, but I am very careful to meet somebody where they are and what is the conversation they're having in their own head first, because I come back to
So
that
you
every.
don't really go in with preconceived notions. You go in
No, I actually have.
completely open-minded to hearing.
You have to be. You
Right,
have to
right,
be. And
right.
this is why, I also have people who are like, can't you just teach? I mean, I can teach the leaders in a team how to implement opt-in cultures, but we actually call ourselves ambition guides. The ambition guide conversations, I'm like, it shouldn't be your boss because your boss already has preconceived notions about who you are,
Mm-hmm.
and your boss has the ability to thumb up or thumb down your future, which is far
Right.
too much of a power dynamic. And so I'm like, you actually want a third party doing that. Are there patterns? Yes. Um,
But it doesn't change how you approach it.
no, it doesn't because, and it doesn't also mean like I am well aware that I have a fairly big personality. I show up in sequins at events and call myself the fairy godmother,
Right.
and you know, there's a video online of me doing a transformation with somebody at a finance event, and like it's big, and because I'm an entertainer, right? Um, I have a lot of people who say, "Well, Joanna, I can't be that," and I'm like, "You don't actually have to be." And so figuring out like what is their version of offering themselves generously and
Mm-hmm.
is really important. I do think um, there is absolutely a social acceptance of guys being more allowed to be more intentional there.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I do talk to, so, I meet every person is unique and individual to themselves, but when I talk to women, we have a very candid conversation around what is the audience they're talking to and, what are their expectations and how not to diminish who they are,
That's
but
the word I was going
also,
to use.
yeah,
Exactly.
like
Exactly.
my goal with everybody, regardless of who they are, is or two things. So one, I sit here and I go like the goal and the narrative for themselves is to get to this place of what I call generous confidence, which
Hmm.
is different from ego-based confidence. And even ego-based confidence is I am
I
awesome
know how
and
to
look
do
at
this.
me, and
Right, right, right.
it's a bit of that fake it until you make it narrative,
Uh-huh.
um, which no one really likes. Generous confidence is the conversation you and I have where we're like, you're awesome, I'm awesome, all good, right? Where you can actually be in that space. So how do I get you comfortable with having um, a confidence, generosity confidence conversation about yourself? Um, but then also,
And I
um,
would say that that doesn't happen overnight.
no, it's, well, this is why you go on a bit of an adventure with me, but also the
Right.
idea that like, um, and this is, now I'm going to tell you about one of my biggest weaknesses. Like somebody said to me once, I went to a dinner party once and they said, oh, we put warning labels on everybody at this dinner party. And I was like, wait, what are you talking about? And they said, we put warning labels on people. And I was like, oh my God, what a fantastic idea. And I was like, what's my warning label? And they said, don't sit next to Joanna or your idea might come to life. And I was like, why is that a warning label? And they were like, do
Right.
you understand you can be a tiny bit terrifying? And I laughed and I said, no, I freaking love that as a warning label. I'm owning it.
Hmm.
Um, and I do like when I meet somebody for the first time, the same way when I met you,
Right.
um, I'm a potentialist at heart. There is nothing more exciting and energizing and fun and all the things when I see somebody else's, like a potential for somebody in
Hmm.
their future, and I see their dreams come true. Like literally, I'm like, ah, this is the best. Right?
And that
That
is
is
so different than 90% of the people that you meet in this world.
Oh, it's the no,
I
but
mean,
it's
really,
not.
because
It's
but
not.
it is sort of,
No.
I mean, you're
Well, because
thinking about that person. You are thinking, you're looking at them and thinking, oh my God, they could do all,
well, because
this is,
I'm in because I've ticked the box on the first one. I'm in the space of generous confidence where I'm like you could choose me. Like there are going to be people who are listening to this who are going to be all like, "She's freaking nuts." Absolutely not. And they will opt out. And I'm like, "I got you. It's fine." But find somebody to help you with this conversation. There are other people who are going to be all like, "Oh my God, that was amazing. She's amazing." And then,
right,
only because I can see some of the names on here, I've got some of my friends who are on here who are probably like, "Look at Joanna go. How cute is
right.
she?" Da da da. Like we all offer up the thing, but because I'm in what I call generous confidence set, like I'm like, here's what I have to offer you. Do you want it? And if you don't, that's okay. I totally
Right.
get it. And if you do, I'm all like, let's go. But the other piece of this is because I'm there, I can see a future for you. And because, I mean, quite frankly, I'm a salesperson for human beings. Like I'm like, your product is your
Hmm.
future time, and how do we teach people how to buy that thing? And I want you, by the way, ladies, this is what I do want for you is to get paid. I'm very ambitious about that, but I tend to get a little bit too ambitious for people and will go a little further than they're often comfortable going.
Uh-huh.
They're all like, "Oh, hang on a second." I'm like, "I got you. We could do this. We could do
And
this."
that's because of the transformation. Because in many people's minds, that's a big, huge transition
It's
that they
scary,
have to make. And it's scary.
right? And
Exactly.
this is why we are guides
That's
to
why we're
help you
having the
through and all of
conversation
that, right?
because
But I
it's,
come back and
you
say, like,
know,
the goal for everybody, whether you're playing with us or not, but the goal for everybody is to, when you are offering up yourself to others, is to, when we've talked about this a couple of times, is to say, like, this is what I want for me, for my future, is to come right up to that line of ambition without crossing over. And that's like, that line is that line of authenticity, is that space where you are offering up the very best version of yourself to choose. And I come back to your question about women versus men.
hmm.
And one of the probably most consistent patterns I see is men have had more practice coming up to that line than women. And I'm going to use a really simple example here. So, and I'm going to go back to dating. And I talk to my 20-something-year-old nieces and nephews to validate that this is still a truism in the world. But like if you
Hmm.
go back to like your first boy-girl dance when you were a kid, and you think about what's happening in that, usually a gymnasium or something like that, and
Right.
what's happening is unless they're dancing with each other, the girls are waiting to be chosen. And if you're LGBTQ, you're basically like, ah, what is all the things going on? I think
Right.
there's some shifts happening, but the boys do the choosing. And they're either out front going, look how fabulous I am, aren't I fantastic? Or they're up in the bleachers going, oh my God, I have to ask a girl to dance. Oh my God, I have to ask a girl to dance. It starts that early because by the time a guy is about 30, he has 500% more experience offering himself up as an option, asking somebody to dance, than a woman does. Now, do we have all the power to choose in that narrative? Absolutely. But we don't have practice in the offer.
Asking, right.
Right. And again, there's a lot of Joanna, I'm a fairly confident person, and my husband is literally the most introverted human being on the planet. There's a whole story there.
I did follow his trip, I have to say.
For those of you that don't know, my husband spent a year at sea on a sailboat alone, no human beings, no land, no nothing. It was insane, with my blessing and my support. But he still asked me to marry him, not the other way around, because that is what our social construct does. And so I sit here for the women who are listening, and I go, look, this isn't a character flaw, and this isn't something that you should feel bad about, and it's not a weakness. I just sit here and I go, look, if there was a skill that you weren't practiced at in any other way, shape, or form, like this is actually where I think women are like there's not a woman I've met who hasn't, when they have decided to get good at something, gotten really freaking good at it. And I'm like,
pretty quickly.
Oh my God, like
really quickly.
They're like, give me the plan, I will do the thing. I'm like, practice this, and for the guys who are watching, understand that similarly, you are not practiced in having the woman ask. And so when we have all sorts of conversations about she's too aggressive or she shouldn't be asking for a compensation raise or all of that narrative, I actually sit here and go, it's not actually about how you are asking, it's unpacking the social construct that
you are asking,
that we're used to. And yes, as much as, because most of the decision makers handing out the stuff are men in the current world, how do you have that conversation? How do you get them into a space? So again, it's not about you, it's about them. You help them see the conversation from a different perspective and actually own some of the differences. The same way that when you are selling a product, and I think about, as an example, the work I've done with both with the companies I've worked for in the past and then current companies. Like I work a lot with Salesforce. The salespeople at Salesforce would be fired if they weren't curious about how their customers perceived their strengths and weaknesses, how their customers looked at their competitors, what real problems their customers were trying to solve. They do what I call solution selling there. Because when you are selling a really complex product that needs collaboration in the future, you have to think about the bidirectionalness of the transaction. And I know I've just said transaction and buy and sell, but the same thing happens with human beings. And we have such a narrative around, ew, well, that's icky and we shouldn't talk. I'm like, I'm sorry, but I really love being able to live in the lifestyle I'm accustomed to, and it takes some fun to do that. And revenue in that scenario is the oxygen that you can have to give you the freedom to choose the future you want, which is where I all come back to. I was fired because I forgot to give somebody something to opt into, and I think that's crazy, and I think we all should.
But look where you are now.
I know. So I'm getting to go to TED on Sunday.
And you reel back to that moment in time, it was a blessing because it really laid out your future for you.
Yeah.
Not knowing in that moment that was where it was going to go, and not knowing you were going to meet the person in line, or not knowing, but your curiosity was already, your mind was spinning, right? Yeah. You were already on that path. You had already, you had skills in you and a point of view that maybe you didn't even realize that you had, and you certainly weren't expressing with other people, but you had a way of looking at things that was
But everybody does.
absolutely.
Everybody does.
It's just
And
recognizing what that is, right?
yeah. Well, this is where I come back and say, like, if anybody who's listening to this is like, well, you know, Joanna, that's nice. It seems like you've got your shit sorted out, blah, 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 blah. Um, you know, I sit here and I say, similar to selling a product, what is one of the first things you do? You do customer market research. So go find, here's my challenge for everybody listening today. You got homework from this session.
Mm-hmm.
Is I say to people, and Karen, you should do this too, because I do this
I'm
for
in. I'm
myself.
in.
I do this for myself every year because you don't actually know the answer. So I
Right.
come back to this every decision made about you and your opportunities is made in the room that you're not in. Go find people and like find 4 people who are already buying the future you. So for you, Karen, I'd say whoever's organizing the GOT event with you this year, like that's who you should ask. I don't remember which one of the group it is.
Mm-hmm.
And you go find them and you say, 1, what 4 words would you use to describe me in a room that you're not in?
Mm-hmm.
Ask 4 people for 4 words, you'll start to get some patterns, right?
Yep.
And then 2, how would you describe me to somebody else? Now, I will give you a warning label. The majority, and my guess is this would be the answer for you too, the majority of people initially are going to say, Karen, you're really good at getting shit done. And you go, thank you. You do not want to be known as a get shit done girl.
Right.
Get shit done girls get given shit to do. You want to be known as the person who is a thinking person. And you go, thank you very much. But
So
here's my question.
Yeah.
I'm curious how, like, what is it about how I think about how to get things done that you value?
Right. And I would go to the mastermind that I run because I think that, you know, the experience I've had with 9 other women has been an amazing experience in doing that. And I think in the different roles and the different hats that you wear, people see you differently. And, and I think, and ask in all of those or ask in each of those, right?
Well, I challenge you. Well, depending on where, like we've had a bit of a conversation about confidence, depending on where you are on the confidence path for this, it's very easy for people to ask their friends the answers to those questions and people that they feel safe with. But they're often not the people who are actually putting dollars and cents on the table for you. And I say buying you, whether as an employee or as a business partner or whatever the scenario. And I think for your mastermind, it's probably okay. But for people listening, like your peers, yes, they are buying the future you too, but they're not buying.
They're not paying you for it.
They are not putting out cash,
right?
So maybe put 1 or 2 on your list of those people, but make sure there's somebody on your list who scares you a tiny bit. Because, you know, as much as I sound like I have it all sorted out and all figured out, like I think 3 days ago, I had my quarterly call with the very fancy bazillionaire executive who is my scary person. Like every time I schedule a call with him, I'm all like, oh my God, what is he going to say?
Right.
Like, and it's ridiculous because he's like, Joanna, you're insane. I think you're hilarious and I think you've got an interesting mind and I learn as much from you. But I'm like, oh my God, this person.
Everybody has this person that they think, oh my God,
like,
right?
You're the best person, right?
Right.
And I always come in and I'm like, okay, what are you saying about me in a room that I'm like, I ask him the questions because not only is it good for me to go like, what am I teaching him about who I am and what I'm thinking? But also because he's a bazillionaire executive, he's in rooms that I'm not in. And I want to make sure what he is saying is what I want him to say.
Right.
And so it's my job to teach him. It's not his job to guess. And if you are not doing this, you are making people guess.
Right. You know, we do need to end this, but one of the questions
I kind of want to say
is, I want to know what you do, and people ask me all the time, well, what do you do actually? And I think probably people say that to you also, what do you do and how would you describe it? And at the end of the day, it's not always straightforward, but in terms of having other people describe you to others, it has to be clear so that they get it and they can they can say, you know, what's your value to them and what are you doing for them and who are
Yeah.
you and what do you bring to the table, you know, and
Yeah.
that takes a while to establish with somebody.
Yeah.
At least, you know, from my experience, but at the same time, you have to get it right in order to have them get it right, I think is
Right.
really the end result.
Yeah. I know.
So, Joanna,
Plus, it
I
can feel fun.
loved chatting with you. Probably could chat for another 2 or 3 hours
Right
easily.
back
But
at you.
how can people find you?
Well, I'm on all of the socials at Joanna Bloor, clearly here on Instagram at Joanna
Exactly.
Bloor, Twitter, LinkedIn. I'm probably most active on Twitter and LinkedIn if you want on the socials, just because of the kind of professional nature of the work that I do.
Hmm.
There's also a YouTube channel where you can watch a lot of the shows I've done in the past. But mostly you can find everything at joannabloor.com, where we're going to be, as I teased a tiny bit, we're going to be announcing the new books that are coming up. And yes, I did say that with an
That's
S.
great. When is
We
it?
are
When do we see the first one?
actual date is TBD, but we are looking in probably the first one will be coming out in the next couple of months, and then we'll have another one. We're going to be reframing the Cinderella story, the ultimate decision made about you in a room that you are not in, later this year. We're also going to be launching Future You World for all of the people who've been through our programming. So
That's great.
they can, I mean, as you said, it's not a one and done conversation. It's kind of an
Right.
ongoing investment. And so that's all going to be live. So we've got lots and lots of stuff that we are putting out there that is asynchronous and full of challenges like the one you got today, and full of activities. And then also to meet lots of other people who are just as curious about who the future them could be. Because, yeah, as I said, ambitions are never a solo journey. It's much more fun together.
No, 100%. And this has been so much fun with you. And I know anyone who's watching, I mean, you just got like the tiniest little taste and inkling of who Joanna is. But imagine yourself in the future with Joanna, because honestly, it's an amazing experience.
Thank
And so
you.
I highly recommend it. And this will be posted on YouTube as well on my channel. I'll also be posting it right after this on Instagram. So anyone who missed it will be able to see it. Joanna, thank you so much. I will put your links. It's so fabulous to see you. And I hope that the universe brings us together many more times and
I
sometime
hope so
soon.
too. All right. Thank
So
you,
thank
Sue.
you. Thanks everybody for watching and for taking that leap. Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.